Welcome into This is Baseball. My name is Brandon Johnson. Let's talk about the All-Star game. I think that the All-Star break was an overall success. I think the Home Run Derby on Monday night just continued to be a super fun event. Congratulations to Kyle Riley on winning that event. He's the league leader in home runs, so it makes sense that he would compete in the Home Run Derby and win the thing. So good for him, good for the Mariners. And I know that the Home Run Derby doesn't have anything to do with the regular season MVP race, but we talked earlier in the season about Aaron Judge kind of being the runaway unanimous MVP for the American League, but Kyle Riley's kind of given Aaron Judge a run for his money, so that'll be something that we'll look at as the season progresses as far as the American League MVP race is. But yeah, loved the Home Run Derby. I think that it's just a super fun event. My only beef with it this season was I don't know what they were doing with the camera angle. I think that was a miss, but a lot of great moments. You saw one of the kids that were shagging fly balls rob a home run. Don't think you're supposed to do that, but that was pretty fun. And I think that Atlanta put on a great show in the All-Star weekend. Just talking about the All-Star game, you had Ludacris out there, Zac Brown Band doing the national anthem, and I think Truist Park is pretty awesome. I think what they built out there with the battery is something that a lot of parks should look at doing, looking at you, Kansas City Royals. But yeah, the All-Star game, I've said it a lot. I think that MLB has the best All-Star game among the major sports, and you get to see the players be themselves. You get the on-field interviews. You get Tarek Skubal and Kyle Riley mic'd up in the first inning. You get Clayton Kershaw doing an interview in his likely final All-Star game. Pete Crow Armstrong, and the list goes on and on, obviously. It looked like it was going to be a blowout with the National League up 6 runs to the American League's 0 runs. The American League came storming back in the 9th inning, back-to-back doubles, and then an infield single from Stephen Kwan to tie the game that scored Bobby Witt Jr. And at the end of the 9th inning, the game was tied, and we did a swing-off. So basically an impromptu home run derby, and I honestly thought it was a lot of fun. I loved it. You could have just done the typical extra inning format, having a ghost runner on second and going from there, but I think this was a lot of fun. So the rules for this swing off were you have 3 players from each team, and each player gets 3 swings, and the teams will alternate. Teams with the most home runs wins the All-Star game, and it did not disappoint. Kyle Schwarber came up there. He was second for the National League and went 3 for 3 on his home runs, which was enough to put them in the lead and hold that lead to win the All-Star game. So a little bit of history, a first for the All-Star game. I think that it was overall a win. I think that the All-Star game, I look forward to it every year. And if you're going to have one like this where it kind of isn't that interesting because a huge lead gets built up, but then you have one team come storming back, and then to get to see history, I think you couldn't have drawn it up better. This is probably exactly what MLB hoped would happen in the All-Star game, was get to a swing off, and here we are. And I'm not to a point where I think it's a good solution in the regular season, but it did kind of remind me of penalty kicks in soccer and how that's a format that works in soccer as far as extra time is concerned. So I still believe that just playing extra innings is the way to go for baseball, but this was a fun alternative in a game that otherwise did not matter. So well done by the players, by the league, by Fox. Just a really, really good event on Tuesday night. All right, I mentioned in Tuesday's show that there's some talk about a salary cap. The MLB owners want it. The MLB Players Association does not want it. The current collective bargaining agreement ends after the 2026 season, and I think a lockout is inevitable. Now, you go back to in between the 2021 and 2022 season, there was a lockout there. It was a 99-day lockout, and the league and the players were able to come to a deal on March 10th of 2022, and the season was only delayed by a week, but they were able to get in the entire season. You go back to the COVID season and the very public feud between the owners and the players as far as how the COVID season was going to play out. There's a lot of drama there. So there's a lot of tension between the owners and the players at the negotiating table, and I think that 2026 is in between 2026 and 2027 is going to be more of the same. I think it's going to be a little bit contentious, and we might be in for a long one. Hopefully we don't miss any baseball in 2027, but I know that a salary cap has been on the league's mind for a while, and I don't see the Players Association budging on that. The Players Association for MLB, I think, is one of the strongest unions in sports, and it's going to be interesting to follow because the economic structure of baseball has been a talking point for many, many years, and should they implement a salary cap? You look at other leagues like NFL and NBA, and particularly NFL, I think a salary cap works really well. It helps with the competitive balance. Kind of everybody has the same playing field as far as money to spend, and you end up with a lot of parity as far as teams that make the postseason, make postseason runs. But if you look at MLB, I think one of the most famous strikes in one of the darkest times in Major League Baseball's history was the 1994 season when the players were striking from 1994 to 1995 for 7.5 months. And the huge reason for that strike was the implementation of a salary cap. The players did not want a salary cap. And here we are 30 years later in a very, very similar situation. So you just hope that we don't repeat history, because that did a lot of damage to Major League Baseball. And it took years to get interest back. It took a 1998 home run chase between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa to really get people paying attention to baseball again. And I think when you talk about a salary cap, I think you have to talk about a salary floor as well, because I think you have big spenders like the Los Angeles Dodgers, the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, the Philadelphia Phillies, all spend a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, we talked about it a few years ago, or going into 2024 season, the Dodgers committed $1 billion between two players. Now, obviously, that wasn't all for 1 year, but you had Shohei Ohtani with his $700 million year. Let me try that again. Shohei Ohtani with his $700 million contract. We learned that is largely deferred out past 2040 or 2045 or something like that. But then you have the teams like the White Sox and Marlins and Rockies that just aren't spending money at all. So I think that you need to find a balance. You need to get the the teams that aren't spending to get up to a certain threshold. I don't know what that is, but I think very clearly and obviously not spending and then fielding a basically minor league team on your major league roster is equally as bad for the sport as having a team that is spending a ridiculous amount of money like the Dodgers are. Now, the difference is with the Dodgers, you can say, and the Mets too, you can say, well, at least they want their team to win. At least they are investing in their product on the field. But then you have teams in the middle that can't necessarily compete for the top free agents in baseball. You're not going to get your, like the Royals aren't going to get Shohei Ohtani. They're not going to get Juan Soto. They're not going to get the next star that's going to command an $800 million contract, right? If I think by 2030, which we're 5 years from that, I think by 2030, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a player that commands $1 billion contract. I think that is the way that we're going. And when I look at it, I go, okay, that's really good for the players, right? That's great for the player. You're making generational wealth, right? But it's really only good for the player. It's not great for anyone else. Obviously, if the Dodgers spend $1 billion on a player, then they win multiple championships with that player. They see that as a good investment, or make a lot of money because they have that player there, because they get butts in seat. They sell a lot of merchandise. They have a really good TV deal, and all the things that come with that. Sure, they see that as a win, but that's free agency. And again, some teams can't do that in free agency. You have to go, if you're the Royals, if you're the Brewers, if you're the Guardians, you kind of have to go in the middle and get some of those mid-tier free agents. You have to really hit on your draft picks. You have to really hit on your trades, and you have to go about winning differently. And you're not going to be a perennial contender. You might go on 5, 6, 7 year runs of being a contender, but having a legitimate chance at winning a World Series is a different subject, where you have like the Tampa Bay Rays, who perennial playoff contender. They've been to 2 World Series, didn't manage to win any of them. Milwaukee Brewers have been a really good team for a long time, but we never seriously think that the Milwaukee Brewers are going to win a World Series. You have the Royals that did manage to win a World Series, and they're really the only small market team that's been able to accomplish that. Cleveland, same thing. Cleveland's been good for years. They managed to get to a World Series, didn't win it, and haven't sniffed it since. I just think I look at a salary cap as a positive, and probably going to get torched for being pro salary cap, but I just see how it works in other leagues, and I think it works. I look at a team in my own backyard, the Kansas City Chiefs, have the best quarterback in the league right now in Patrick Mahomes, and he could probably play anywhere because any team would be happy to have him, but he has stayed in Kansas City and has had success in Kansas City, and the Chiefs have been able to pay him because of salary cap. You could have, if NFL didn't have a salary cap, Patrick Mahomes might be making $700 million like Shohei Ohtani with the New York Jets or something, or the Los Angeles Rams, right? But he's in Kansas City because there's a salary cap, and you have good players across the league in different spots. Jared Goff is a good example. Jared Goff plays in Detroit. I don't think that Detroit is a destination for great players to play. Josh Allen in Buffalo, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and so on and so forth. Could you imagine if you think about it this way? Let's just use Juan Soto as an example, where, we know Juan Soto is going to be in free agency heading into the 2025 season. And I'm just going to keep using the Royals because it's my team. And you're like, oh, I think we can make the numbers work with Juan Soto, and we can really go and make a run for Juan Soto, and he can be kind of the missing piece for the Kansas City Royals, right? I bet you the Royals never even talked to Juan Soto's agent because it's just not realistic. We don't have $765 million to throw at a player over 15 years. Now, don't even get me started on long-term contracts and the back half of them being terrible for teams. I've done an episode about it where you have Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols and Chris Davis, Robinson Cano, and players like that signed these mega deals that they were probably fun for 5 years for the team that signed them, and then the rest of the time they're just like, man, what are we doing? Because you have an aging superstar that is declining in ability, and now you just are paying a guy a lot of money to not be very productive. So that's another negative on a salary cap for a team. So I know this is all wishful thinking. I don't think that there's ever going to be a salary cap in Major League Baseball. And I don't blame the players for not wanting a salary cap in baseball. If you're the next man up to get your money and all of a sudden there's a salary cap, you're just out of luck. Well, in the old economic format, I could have made $815 million this year, but now I'm only getting $260 over 5 years, whatever it is, right? So I get it. I just think for the balance of the sport and health of the sport and just overall parity. And I know that there's a lot of teams and new teams that make the playoffs, but when you think of teams that legitimately have a chance of winning a title, I think the list is pretty short. So like I said before, I've never really gone full into detail on where I stand on a salary cap, but I see it as a positive, but I understand why the players would never be for that. So yeah, 2026 is going to be interesting as far as the collective bargaining agreement goes, but I'm sure that we will obviously see more about that as time goes on and we get closer to that a year and a half from now. And then we'll really dive in, because at that point, if they're going to be striking or locking players out, we're going to have to really come up with some interesting things to talk about, because there won't be baseball. So buckle up for that possibility. But that's all I have this week. Thank you for listening to the show. I will catch you next week. And who knows, between now and next week, maybe we'll know more about the Royal Stadium situation. We probably won't, but more wishful thinking. I'll see you next week.